The war in Ukraine is depleting Russia's weapons stockpiles faster than its military-industrial complex can produce, while high interest rates are critical for the defense sector. As Fortune writes, there is growing evidence that Russia's military-industrial complex is reaching its breaking point after nearly 3 years of fighting in Ukraine. The aggressor country's ruler, Vladimir Putin, mobilized the economy for the invasion, resulting in huge amounts of state money being poured into the defense industry and low unemployment as working-age people make weapons in factories or serve at the front. All this pushed inflation in Russia to 9%. Even Putin was forced to admit that this was worrying. Against this backdrop, the Central Bank of the Russian Federation raised its base rate to 21% to contain prices, but the tight monetary policy affects business. Leaders in the defense industry and related sectors that are crucial to the war machine have sounded the alarm in recent months. The head of state arms giant Rostec predicted that if rates remain high, virtually most of our enterprises will go bankrupt. The owner of the Russian metallurgical giant Severstal emphasizes that it is more profitable for enterprises to reduce the volume of operations and keep money in interest-bearing deposits. The head of Chelyabinsk Forge and Press Plant warned at an economic forum that key areas of mechanical engineering could fall apart. Carnegie Eurasia Center's Alexandra Prokopenko noted that contractors in the Russian defense industry have complained of non-payment and higher financing costs. Analysts predict that the Russian economy will not be able to sustain a war against Ukraine next year because it will run out of the ability to replace losses on the battlefield with weapons from stockpiles. Thus, in a month, the Russians lose about 320 barrels of tanks and artillery guns, but Russian factories can produce only 20 units monthly. This forces the Kremlin to dig into obsolete Soviet reserves. Moreover, even 50 tanks and armored vehicles from the 1950s, which were used for filming by the largest Russian film studio, were taken for the needs of the military. I knew they needed them, so I contacted the Defense Ministry and they took these vehicles. Mosfilm CEO Karen Shakhnazarov told Putin during the meeting. Last month, the Institute for the Study of War said Russia faces serious problems in the near future, saying the aggressor's economy was not as resilient as the Kremlin claims. The president of the Ukrainian Pilots Association, Gennady Kazan, stated that Russia has an economic reserve until the end of the next year and it needs to be squeezed. After that, their economy should collapse. Aviation expert Anatoly Krapchinsky noted today that Russia has already lost 900 air defense units since the start of the full-scale war. Ukrainian forces successfully attacked Russian positions using only ground and first-person view FPV drones instead of infantry, an army spokesperson claimed. Speaking on national TV, Sergeant Vladimir Detiarov, spokesperson for the Kharkiv Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine, said dozens of units of robotic and unmanned equipment supported by surveillance drones were used in the assault near the village of Lipsy, north of Kharkiv. Detiarov said the drones included ground systems equipped with machine guns and kamikaze FPV drones. He did not specify when the attack took place. Commenting on the reports, the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, said the attack highlighted the difference in attitude towards frontline troops shown by Moscow and Kyiv. Ukrainian officials have repeatedly highlighted Ukraine's efforts to utilize technological innovations and asymmetric strike capabilities to offset Ukraine's manpower limitations, in contrast with Russia's willingness to accept unsustainable casualty rates for marginal territorial gains, the ISW said. The ISW says that Russian military losses in its full-scale invasion of Ukraine have exceeded 750,000 Russian soldiers and are expected to surpass 1 million Russian troops within 6 months, UK Under-Secretary of Defence Luke Pollard said. The UK's latest estimate is in line with figures from Ukraine's General Staff, which as of December the 19th sits at 768,220 troops lost since the start of the war. The figures do not specify killed or wounded, though the overall consensus is that it includes dead, wounded, missing, and captured. It is highly likely that they have sustained significant combat casualties whilst only achieving limited tactical gains, Pollard told British parliamentarians. Russia has gained ground in eastern Ukraine and Kursk Oblast in recent months, but at the cost of heavy casualties. Russian losses reached record highs in November and December, with a daily high of 2,030 troops lost in November, marking the highest daily loss since the beginning of Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022. Russian losses exceeded 45,000 troops and $3 billion worth of equipment in November. President Vladimir Zelenski revealed in a rare statement that Ukraine had lost 43,000 soldiers on the battlefield since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. Ukraine is developing numerous new types of drone systems. Military tech developers created a new unmanned ground vehicle with the ability to carry explosives and drive under-armored vehicles. The project's spokesperson, Victoria Kovalchuk, told Business Insider on October the 25th. The UGV, named Rattle S or Honey Badger, was developed as part of the Brave One government initiative. The initiative was launched in April to invest in defense tech innovations that can be utilized by the Ukrainian military, as well as serve as a platform to connect the industry's stakeholders. The main idea is that the robot is used as a mobile warhead that carries anti-tank mines or other explosive devices, said Kovalchuk, adding that it can run for 40 to 50 minutes at an average speed or for up to 2 hours at a slower speed. The contract between Ukraine's Naftogaz and PJSC Gazprom for the transit of Russian gas through Ukraine to Europe, mainly Hungary and Slovakia, expires on December the 31st of this year. Kiev has repeatedly stated that it does not intend to extend the agreement. At the same time, Slovakia and Hungary's dependence on Russian hydrocarbons, especially in winter, is more than critical. These countries, unlike most other EU states, have virtually no alternative sources of raw material imports, and the situation with money to pay for example, LNG, is not very good. All this time, Bratislava and Budapest have been trying to negotiate with the Ukrainian authorities about extending the contract or finding alternative ways to supply Russian gas. However, Kyiv has dug in its heels and flatly refuses to even discuss this issue. Meanwhile, there are only a few days left before the contract expires. In these circumstances, Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico threatened Ukraine with a serious conflict if gas transit from Russia is stopped. If Zelensky does not let our gas in, a serious conflict with Ukraine could arise, Fico wrote on his social media page. He recalled that although Slovakia does not carry out military supplies to Ukraine, it does provide humanitarian aid. At the same time, until recently, Fico did not object to contracts of Slovak private defense companies to sell their products to Kyiv, but he may change his mind. It is known that Slovakia sells fuel and lubricants to Ukraine, and these are obtained as a result of processing Russian oil at local refineries. And this channel may be closed, and this, among other things, is fuel for armored vehicles and motor transport of the armed forces of Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine have not reached an agreement on the continuation of Russian gas transit through Ukraine to Europe, despite Azerbaijan's mediation efforts. Reuters reported this, citing a senior source in the Azerbaijani energy company SOCAR. The EU and Ukraine are said to have asked Azerbaijan to facilitate negotiations with Russia on a gas transit agreement which expires at the end of this year. Kremlin leader Vladimir Putin said that a new agreement with Kyiv for gas transit to Europe was no longer possible. Ukraine, which has been resisting a full-scale Russian invasion since February 2022, announced that it will not renew the contract, under which about 15 billion cubic meters of Russian gas is transported annually through Ukrainian territory to Europe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Kyiv might consider continuing the transit of Russian gas, but only if Russia does not receive payment for it until the war ends. However, this condition is unlikely to be accepted by Moscow. The SOCAR source claimed that the company had been mediating negotiations between Ukrainian and Russian energy companies for almost a year at the request of Ukraine and the EU. The source noted that high-level executives met with representatives of Ukrainian energy companies on the 2nd of May in Istanbul and the 29th of August in Vienna, adding, in the end, the Ukrainian and Russian sides could not agree on terms.